All right. Excellent job, Ellie. Els Rose, who just led worship for us, hopefully you caught that, is one of the high school students from the youth group where I teach out at Revival down in Menifee. And I remember it was a few months ago. I didn't even know, and then Matt, the worship leader, didn't even know that she led worship, and I was down. I was at. Oh, we're getting feedback over here from multiple phones. Anyways, I saw her leading worship at the Friday night high school group home study, and we didn't even know. She barely says anything, and we didn't even know that she played guitar. And anyway, she did an excellent job. Thank you very much for leading us in worship, for participating, partnering with us. Nehemiah chapter 5, if you're going to follow along, Nehemiah chapter 5 is where we're at. If you are just dropping in, you're wondering what in the world is this, or maybe you saw that I was going live and you thought, oh man, maybe he's got he's going to do something funny, or I don't know. But what we're doing is, this is called House to House. And what we're doing is we start with the worship leader. So you just saw Ellie leading worship over at her house and on Instagram Live. And then once she ends, then I start up my Instagram Live and take you through a Bible study, a short Bible study. So it goes from the worship leader's house to my house, both of those to your house. So thus, house to house, you have it. Okay, Nehemiah chapter 5 is where we are at this evening. Thank you for joining. We've got 4 different main divisions here. The first one is problems revealed. Problems revealed. Then we'll see problems resolved. Problems resolved. And then we will see presenting himself as the example. See Nehemiah presenting himself as the example. And then lastly, we will see prayer. We'll talk some more about that as we get into it. But let's go ahead and jump into our first section here, problems revealed. So what I've been doing over the last 4 chapters is encouraging you, challenging you to get out there and serve during this time and be a blessing to someone. And whenever you do that, you're going to have challenges. Now, in chapter 4, what did we see? We saw challenges from the outside. Tonight, we see challenges from the inside. So there's always the potential for both. Whenever you have people involved, there's going to be some amount, at some point, there's going to be some amount of drama. There's going to be some amount of disagreement. There's going to be divisions at some point, and we want to know how to handle those. And so if you, during this time, or maybe you're trying to do a good thing, maybe you're trying to help a neighbor or a coworker or something, and maybe you've got people on the outside that are telling you, oh, you shouldn't do stuff like that, but maybe it's like someone from your own home, or maybe it's someone from your own church, someone that's close to you, and you're thinking, hey, what's the problem? How do we handle that? So Nehemiah chapter 5, we looked at problems revealed. Let's look at the problems here. And these are so applicable for our time that we're in. Verse 1, and there was a great outcry of the people and their wives against their Jewish brethren. So we learn right away that there's a problem between the Jews themselves, the people that are working on the wall, that are within the city, that are helping one another. There's a disagreement between those groups of people. And here's the first one. The first problem that's revealed has to do with food. Now, what are we dealing with right now, right? We're dealing with shortages. It's getting a little bit better. You go to the store, you can actually find some meat now. But for a while there, for a week or two, it was just so bad. You can't even find meat. And but look what it says in verse 2. For there were those who said, we, our sons, and our daughters are many. Therefore, let us get grain, that we may eat and live. So it had to do with grain, with feeding their families. Now, we're thinking, well, I don't understand. It'll be clear why in just a moment here. But food, whenever you have groups of people and you have food, especially a shortage of food, the stress level goes up. And especially if you are trying to provide for your family and you're not finding the food that you need in order to provide for your family. Now you and I, most of us, I'm guessing that all of us, I'm going to go ahead and I think it's safe to say that all of us, there aren't any of us that really know what it's like to be starving. Now maybe we've at different times in our life had to go without food for a period of time, but it was probably relatively short compared to other parts of the world, other times in history. But nevertheless, there's a shortage of food, and when you have a shortage of food, stress levels go up. I mean, so applicable to our time right now, right? So there's a problem with food, but there's also, beginning in verse 3, there's a problem with finances. Food and finances. How many people, I wonder if any of you right now watching, are out of work? And you're dealing with food and finances. The stress level, it just goes up and up and up. Finances, you start thinking, okay, am I going to be able to purchase what I need? Am I going to be able to pay my bills? Is my car going to get taken? Am I going to lose my house? All of these questions can run through your mind. So see how applicable it is. Now, verse 3 has to do with finances. Here is what it says. There were also some who said, "We have mortgaged our lands and vineyards and houses, that we might buy grain because of the famine." So now we find out that there was actually a famine that was taking place. So you've got a problem with food, you've got a problem with finances, and those are both due to this famine. Famine means that there was a shortage of food. Verse 4, there were also those who said, "We have borrowed money for the king's tax on our lands and vineyards. Yet now our flesh is as the flesh of our brethren, our children as their children. And indeed we are forcing our sons and our daughters to be slaves, and some of our daughters have been brought into slavery. It is not in our power to redeem them, for other men have our lands and vineyards." So I don't know if you caught that or not, but we've got a problem with food here in this chapter, problem with finances, there's a famine taking place, and then in verse 4, there's a problem with taxes. Now, thankfully, our government here in the U.S. has decided to push back the deadline for filing for taxes, but still, they're not just going to forget about it for this year. Those taxes are still going to be owed. And, so all of the stress levels going up. You got food, you got finances, you got this famine taking place, you got money being borrowed in order to pay taxes. All of this stuff is just mounting. And you have these Jews. Now, it's still not really clear what the problem is. Verse 5, "Yet now our flesh is as the flesh of our brethren, our children as their children." What is he talking about? Well, it will become clear as we get into our next section, but let me just tell you real quickly. The problem is this, is that you have Jews who were supposed to be working together, who were actually taking advantage of one another in order, and loaning money, but at exuberant rates, percentage rates. Now, that's not surprising, is it? It's not a shot at any of my Jewish friends, okay? It's a shot at just people in general. Just people in general. I mean, every time there's some kind of crisis going on, we've seen it before during hurricanes and different things around the world, in the U.S. and around the world. You have people who have hoarded, who are now charging extreme prices on things, or you might even have store owners, shop owners, who are charging people just these ridiculous prices for items that generally wouldn't cost that much. You have people taking advantage of one another, and here in Nehemiah's time, even though morale is up and everybody's joining in the work, still you have some that are taking advantage of their own people. What a sad situation it is, and embarrassing and frustrating and all of that. Now, that's our first section, problems revealed. Let's move on to our second section, beginning in verse 6, which is problems resolved. Okay? In verse 6, we're going to find two sub-points here in verse 6. Nehemiah says, "And I became very angry when I heard their outcry and these words. Now, he got angry. That's one of the points, but it's not the first point. It's not the first subpoint. The first subpoint, it says that he got angry when I heard their outcry. So the first thing that he did in resolving this problem was that he heard the problem. He listened. He heard their outcry. That is so important for us, that we make sure that we hear the entire story. Tell me what it is that's going on. I want to understand the whole thing. Nehemiah was evidently a good listener. We've all heard it. We've all heard it a million times. This is 1,000,001 because I'm going to say it, that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and that we ought to listen more than we speak, that we ought to listen twice as much as we speak. Being a good listener is a good quality for a leader or anyone. Anyone can be, should be a good leader. It's a good quality for any leader. And the first thing that he did in order to resolve this problem was that he heard their outcry. I listed it as gave attention. He gave attention. He paid attention to them. The second thing was his response to that outcry was that he got angry. So we have, as he's seeking to resolve this problem, he gave his attention, and then he got angry. Did you know that getting angry is actually a good thing? Some of you are thinking, yeah, I do that real well. Maybe you get on the freeway and you get angry. Driving, that's one of my weaknesses. I have a tough time staying calm, staying loving, staying compassionate when I'm driving, because we've got all of these people out there that don't know how to drive, and they're on my street. Don't they know it's my street? And they're not supposed to be on my street? I get impatient. Nehemiah gets angry, and it's a good thing. Now, there are 2 different types of anger as far as what we learn in the Bible. And one is what you and I know very, very well. It's getting angry, losing control, and responding in a bad way. We're used to that. We know that. I know that. I know you know that. Don't try and lie. We all know that. This is actually a good anger, and the Bible talks about a godly anger, a righteous indignation. One of our favorite stories. Everybody knows it, even if you're not too familiar with your Bible. Everybody knows about the time that Jesus went in and cleared the temple and flipped over tables and told everybody to get out. And we love that story. That was a righteous anger. That was a godly anger. Nehemiah here has a godly anger. Now, there's some proof. If maybe you're thinking, well, how do you know it's a godly anger? Well, I'll show you here in just a second. But the first 2 things he did in order to resolve the problem was that he gave his attention to the problem. He listened, paid attention, heard their outcry, and then he got angry. And he got angry for good reason. Now, it says in verse 7, I'm sorry, before I go on, let me just, I forgot to mention this. I just said right now that he got angry for good reason. There are things that you and I should get angry over, like injustice, like somebody being cheated. Those are things that we should get angry over. What we shouldn't get angry over is, I can't believe you took the last bagel. Those are not things that we should get angry over. That's not righteous anger. That's not righteous indignation. This is a good thing because he's angry because he sees people being cheated and mistreated. Okay? Now, he gave his attention. He got angry. Verse 7. Verse 7, we have another 2 points here. After serious thought. So we have he gave his attention. He got angry. Here we have gave it serious thought. He gave it some serious thought. He carefully considered it, some of your translations may say. After serious thought. Now, I told you I would give you proof as to why this is righteous anger, why it's a godly anger. Here's why. Is because he was able to still seriously consider the situation. You see, when you and I get angry oftentimes, what happens is we allow that anger to control us. In this case, Nehemiah got angry, but he controlled the anger. Do you see the difference? When anger takes control of me, then it's an ungodly anger. It's a selfish anger. But when I can control that anger and use it the way it ought to be used, well then that is a godly anger. So here it says that after serious thought. Those of us that are parents, and those of you that are not parents, and you're thinking, why are my parents, spazzing out, and why are they so crazy? Well, I'll give you a little clue right now. Those of us that are parents, we understand this. We understand what it is to get angry and allow that anger to take control. And maybe we say things or do things, or hand down some punishments that really are unnecessary. And then afterwards we realize, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I responded in anger. That's those of you that are students, maybe, that are thinking, well, why are my parents always getting all crazy? Well, that's why, because sometimes we allow our anger to take control of us. But here, after serious thought. So he gave it serious thought. He didn't just fly off the handle, start beating people up. He gave it serious thought. So he gave attention, he got angry, gave it serious thought, and then he gave correction. Here it is in verse 7. I rebuke, and really it goes from verse 7 all the way down to verse 13 is the correction that he's handing out. He says, I rebuked, or I corrected, the nobles and rulers. Notice who he started with. He started with the leaders. And said to them, each of you is exacting usury from his brother. In other words, you're lending money and you are requiring high percentage rates in return, which they actually were not even supposed to be doing at all. When they lent money, they were supposed to lend it without charging percentage rates. But anyhow, so he's correcting them. Each of you is exacting usury from his brother. So I called a great assembly against them. There's that word great again. Those of you that were here 4 studies ago in chapter 1, you might remember that they were in great distress, so he called on a great God. Here we heard several verses ago that there was a great outcry. So here he calls a great assembly against them. In other words, he gathered everybody up. Now, let me give you a little bit of practical wisdom. Generally speaking, when you're going to correct someone, you want to do it privately. If it's just one person that needs to be corrected, you want to do that privately. That's always best. It's always going to be received better. However, in this case, there were many people involved. So Nehemiah called this great assembly. He called this big meeting together, and he corrects everybody there out in the open, on the spot. Verse 8, it says, and I said to them, now remember, he's talking to the leaders here. According to our ability, we have redeemed our Jewish brethren who were sold to the nations. In other words, evidently they had actually paid to buy back some of their own Jewish brothers or sisters, their people who had been sold to different nations in slavery. Now indeed, will you even sell your brethren? Or should they be sold to us? He says, what? We redeemed them from slavery, and now we're just going to put them right back into slavery? At the end of verse 8, look at this. Then they were silenced and found nothing to say. That's actually a great response. When somebody calls you on something that you've been doing wrong and you know you're wrong, it's best to just okay, just give it to me. I'll take it. Verse 9, then I said, what you are doing is not good. It's more correction. He tells them straight out, it's not good what you're doing. Should you not walk in the fear of our God because of the reproach of the nations, our enemies? Now, this is key to really everything that Nehemiah does. This is at the heart of it. I'll mention it here. We'll move on, and then I'll come back to it when we finish up our study. But look at verse 9. Then I said, what you are doing is not good. And he says this, should you not walk in the fear of our God because of the reproach of the nations, our enemies? He says, what you should do is you should live your life in fear or in respect of God. Especially, he says in verse 9, especially because of the surrounding nations, because they're watching us. And we need to be a good example. But what Nehemiah said here, should you not walk in the fear of our God, that really is what motivated Nehemiah. It was, he was zealous for God. He was He was jealous for the things of God. Not jealous, I think I've mentioned this before, not jealous for himself. He didn't want the things that were due to God. But he wanted God to receive all of the glory. He wanted God to get all of the praise. And in order to do that, he said we should be walking in the fear of our God. That's what Nehemiah did. And you see, that's the secret. That's what's going to motivate you and I. We'll talk some more about that at the end, but let's move on. Verse 10. I also, with my brethren and my servants, am lending them money and grain. Please let us stop this usury. So Nehemiah actually says, hey, I'm me and my servant, the people that are with me, everybody that's with me, everybody that came into town with me from Shushan, the palace, we're lending money and grain to the people. We're not expecting them to pay it back with high percentage rates. So he says, let's stop. Verse 11, call to action. Here it is. Restore now to them. Give them back their things. Even this day in verse 11, their lands, their vineyards, their olive groves, their houses, also 100th of the money and the grain, the new wine and the oil that you have charged them. Give it all back. Give it all back. Verse 12, so they said, here's their response, we will restore it and will require nothing from them. We will do as you say. Then I called the priests and required an oath from them that they would do according to this promise. So he calls the priest now it's kind of confusing there. Then I called the priest and required an oath from them. You think, well, wait a minute. The priests were in on this also? No, actually what he's saying is, remember he had called the, who did he say? The nobles and the rulers. And he's correcting them. And when they say, yes, we'll stop doing what we'll stop taking advantage of our brothers, of our own people. What he does at that point is he then calls in the priests, the religious leaders, together, and he causes, what he does is he makes the political leaders take an oath in front of the religious leaders. The religious leaders were the witnesses. Probably had them sign something. But that's what's going on there. It wasn't that the religious leaders were taking advantage of people. Now, we've seen this. We've seen so far problems revealed, problems solved. Now we see that Nehemiah, here, our third main point, presented himself as the example. In verses 14 and 15, we find out that he provided for his own. Moreover, from the time that I was appointed to be their governor in the land of Judah, from the 20th year until the 32nd year of King Artaxerxes, 12 years, he says, neither I nor my brothers ate the governor's provisions. But the former governors who were before me laid burdens on the people and took from them bread and wine, besides 40 shekels of silver. Yes, even their servants bore rule over the people, but I did not do so because of the fear of God. There's that phrase again. But you notice that Nehemiah, he's giving himself as an example, and he says, look, I provided for my own. All those years that I was there working with them, I provided for my own. I never expected anything from them. Okay? It goes on in verse 16 to say that not only did he provide for his own, he provided for others. In verse 16, indeed, I also continued the work on this wall, and we did not buy any land. Okay? Land was cheap because of the famine, because of the condition that the city was in. But he says, we did not buy land. We didn't take advantage of buy land. All my servants were gathered there for the work. We came to do the work. That's it. Nothing else. What a wonderful example. And then he goes on to say in verses 17 and 18, and at my table were 150 Jews and rulers, besides those who came to us from the nations around us. In other words, Nehemiah was feeding all of these people. 150 Jews and rulers, besides people that came from other places looking for food. So Nehemiah sets himself up as an example and says, look, do what I'm doing. Do what I'm doing. And here we find out that he's feeding all of these people. Incredible. Not taking, but giving. And there again, you and I, want to be busy giving right now and not taking. Listen, it's okay to go and buy supplies to stock up and have things to take care of your family. But we also at the same time ought to be giving and not just taking. How can we invest in people? How can we invest in God's kingdom? As God is working and blessing people, how can we invest in that? By being giving ourselves. So let's do what Philippians 2 said and not just think about ourselves or consider our own selves, but other people also. And that's what Nehemiah is doing here. Verse 18, look at this. Now that which was prepared daily was 1 ox and 6 choice sheep. An ox. You understand what he's saying? An entire ox every day. Okay? 6 sheep. Okay? Sorry for those of you that are animal lovers. I didn't write this. Okay? I'm reading what it says. Prepared daily was 1 ox and 6 choice sheep. Also fowl, that means birds, were prepared for me. So it's every day it's ox, it's an ox, an entire ox, 6 sheep, and then birds also. That might have been, I don't know, whatever kind of birds those were that they were eating. But it was because it wasn't just for him. He wasn't just living high on the hog and, man, I'm going to take all I can and can all I get. He's what he's doing is he's using his resources to be a blessing to other people. Now, what a lesson. What a lesson. That you and I, we have resources. Everybody's got something that we can give. Some of us more than others. Some of us less than others. But so what? Regardless of what amount we have, we've got something that we can give. And if you don't have anything, maybe you've got no food whatsoever to give. Well, what can you give? Can you give some of your time? Can you reach out to someone and give some of your attention to them? Can you listen to their problems? Maybe you don't have answers to their problems. And so you think, well, I don't want to listen to their problems because I don't have answers. Listen, a lot of times people, I've found this, a lot of times people just want someone to listen to them. They just need someone to listen to them. And if you'll stop for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe it is a half an hour, so what? You don't have anything better to do. You're quarantined. Take some time. And maybe it's not food, maybe it's not time. Maybe you're busy and maybe this time has become even busier for you. It's become way busier for me. This is crazy. We need to go back to meeting together in rooms and all that kind of stuff, because this is way more work than I was expecting. But maybe it's not food that you have to give. Maybe it's not time that you can give. Maybe it's money. Maybe you can buy something for someone. Maybe someone's out of work. There are millions of people filing for unemployment. Surely you know someone that's out of work. And you think, well, they're getting their unemployment benefits. Okay, well, have they kicked in yet? Maybe they haven't kicked in yet. Maybe you need to check with them. Maybe you need to find out, hey, are you okay? I've actually talked to, I think I've talked to 3 different people in the last week who are out of work, not even because of this, but because of surgeries that they've had recently. Or because they got injured, and so they're out of work and in need. Check up on them. Maybe they're doing fine, but do you know that for sure? Maybe you could reach out to them and just ask how they're doing. You see, even something like that can be a tremendous blessing to someone when they realize, man, that person noticed that I haven't been around, or they noticed that I haven't been working, whatever. You pay some attention, and it can be a tremendous blessing and encouragement to people. And those are the things that we want to be doing right now. He says in the second half of verse 18, also fowl were prepared for me, and once every 10 days, an abundance of all kinds of wine. Okay, now that might excite some of you. I don't drink wine. I don't drink alcohol, not because I'm super holy or anything. Because I don't. I like to keep my wits about me at all times, be aware, and I don't want anything clouding my judgment. But I'm waiting for Jesus to drink with me. Remember, he said that I will not drink of this. He had the wine, said I will not drink of it again until we're together. And I want to wait until then. Anyhow, that's just a little personal note about me. He goes on to say this at the end of verse 18. Yet in spite of this, I did not demand the governor's provisions because the bondage was heavy on this people. So you see, whatever, there were other people that had come to town and taken advantage. They came as rulers, as leaders, but took advantage of the people. And Nehemiah says, I didn't accept or receive or expect anything from the people at all. In fact, I provided for my own and those that were with me. And on top of that, I provided for others. Now, it's important for you and I to understand that it's not Nehemiah bragging. It's Nehemiah who he's leading by example. Brilliant. Leading by example. Imagine that. Imagine if leaders led by example. Imagine if they were the example of how to do things. Nehemiah is leading by an example, and what a blessing that is. Okay? Let's finish up here in verse 19. Here is our fourth and final section, and it's one verse, and it's prayer. Okay? So what do we have? Problems revealed, problems resolved, and then we had presented himself as the example, and lastly we have prayer. Remember me, my God, for good, according to all that I have done for this people. Simple prayer. I love that. Sometimes we think, man, if we're going to pray, it's just got to be like, 20 minutes long. And we got to throw some hallelujahs in there and, some, whatever. But Nehemiah doesn't do any of that. He seems to me to be the type of individual let's just cut to the chase. We don't need any frills. We don't need any pomp and circumstance. Let's just get down to it. And when he prays, very simple prayer. Remember me, my God. That's it. Remember me, my God, for good, according to all that I have done for this people. Now, again, this is a prayer that he would have prayed in private. It's not like he's standing up in front of everybody and saying, God, please remember me for all the good things that I'm doing to all these peasants or something like that. It's Nehemiah praying to God in the secret of his own heart. And it's a very simple prayer. But it's a good reminder of the 3 C's of prayer. Remember, I told you, if you're here for the first one, you'll remember this, that there were 3 C's of prayer. Conceive it in prayer. Whatever you are considering doing, whatever you're thinking about doing, whatever you're starting, start it in prayer. Conceive it in prayer. Give birth to it in prayer and through prayer. Conceive it in prayer. As you are conducting that work, whatever it is that you've prayed about and whatever it is that you're doing, now what you want to do is you want to conduct it in prayer. So conceive it in prayer, conduct it in prayer. Okay? And then lastly, what we won't see this until we get to the end of the book, obviously, but I'll tell you right now, and that is conceive it in prayer, conduct it in prayer, conclude it in prayer. You might even say that he concluded this in prayer as he makes this correction. As he corrects these people and deals with this, he ends this episode with prayer. Conceive it in prayer, conduct it in prayer, conclude it in prayer. Well, what I want to do is, as we finish, we're going to finish in just a moment, but you know what that means for a teacher. That means like 20 more minutes, right? It's not going to take me 20 more minutes. Don't check out. I'm going to finish right now. I want you to notice back up in verse 15. Verse 15. He says, but the former governors who were before me laid burdens on the people and took from them bread and wine, besides 40 shekels of silver. Yes, even their servants bore rule over the people. But I did not do so. And here's the secret again. We mentioned this earlier, and this is where I'm going to finish. Because of the fear of God. That fear, for those of you that may not know, means it's a healthy fear. It's a good fear. It's a respect for God. And there is some fear in there, like I'm respecting, like the same way that some of us might respect our parents, especially when we were little. It's like you respect them or you're going to get that bottom swatted. So we respect God in that same way. We respect Him, we have respect for Him. And we also know there is also an element of good fear in there, knowing that God, if He wanted to, could snatch the life out of us. So we want to be careful. We want to be mindful of that. But when he says because of the fear of God, it means respect for God. It means that he wanted to honor God. And that is what motivated everything that Nehemiah did. So the way that we're living right now, the way that you and I are living right now, especially in this time as there's sickness and fear running absolutely rampant, what are we motivated by? The things that we're doing, why are we doing them? The things that we're, maybe we're stocking up on and, packing the fridge and packing the freezer with food and, getting ourselves all set up for World War Z or something. It's the things that we're doing. What are we motivated by? Are we motivated by fear, or are we motivated by faith? Are we motivated by this virus that's going on, or are we motivated by the fear of God? Do we have a healthy fear, a respect, a desire for God in our hearts? And is that why we're motivated? And is that why we're doing things? Is that why we're living the way we're living? So we want to check our own selves personally and say, okay, God, why am I doing the things that I'm doing? And is there some way that you want to use me, God? Is there some way that you want to use me to bless someone else? Maybe I've got some food I can share, or maybe it's supplies that I can share, or maybe it's money, or maybe it's time, or maybe it's maybe you've got the gift of playing an instrument and singing, and you can do that. Or I've seen all kinds of neat things on the internet, probably the same stuff that you guys have seen. I saw someone in San Francisco. It's, everybody there is on lockdown. I shouldn't say lockdown, shelter in place, whatever they call it, safer at home. But this guy was actually outside with his daughter, like out in the alleyway, playing his violin for people that were walking by. Just to brighten up their day. I mean, what is it that you can do? You've got something that you can do. Maybe it's some special ability. Maybe it's not a special ability. But maybe it's just some way to be a blessing to someone. Maybe I don't know. But that's where I talked about in our very first study about courage and what did I say? There were three things: courage, but one of them was creativity. Being creative during this time, thinking outside of the box, and thinking of ways that you can be a blessing to other people. Okay, so let me go ahead and close in prayer, and I'll let you guys get back to your evening. I'm going to get back to watching Robin Hood on Disney Plus, and I'll let you guys get back to what you're doing. Let me go ahead and pray. Father, thank you so much for tonight and for your word, for this chapter, and what a great encouragement and what a great correction to those of us that struggle with our own selfishness, which is all of us, at least at times. Thank you for this chapter. We thank you for your word, because it spells out so clearly how we should be responding, how we should be acting, how we should be living, how to deal with problems, how to deal with dilemmas, how to deal with problems that rise when we're trying to do a good work and there are potential distractions rising, how to deal with those things. Help each of us, myself, help all of those that are listening, both individuals and families. Help us to team up together and to allow you to use us to be a blessing to someone. Those of us that have a gift, maybe it's to teach, maybe it's to play an instrument, maybe it's to sing, maybe, I don't know, whatever it might be. Maybe it's a sport, you can use that, I don't know. Maybe there are many of us who don't have some kind of special gift or talent that way. But maybe we have food that we can share, or supplies that we can share, or maybe it's money that we can give, or maybe it's time. Maybe it's a listening ear to someone. Maybe it's a listening ear to someone that talks too much, but they just want to be heard for a while. Maybe it's someone that's single. They may not even be old. Maybe they're young and they're single and they're just lonely because they're sheltering in place like everybody else. Maybe there's a neighbor, someone that's we haven't seen in a while. We're wondering. Give us the strength to just walk across the street or next door and knock on the door. Use us, please, to brighten up someone's day during this time. We thank you so much, Father, and we commit these things to you and pray these things in Jesus' name, and amen. All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining. I believe the next one is going to be Tuesday night. I will just be checking my Instagram. I'll be putting it up very soon. I got to make sure, I got to talk to my sister again, who's going to be leading worship, and make sure that she's good to go for Tuesday night. But we're looking at Tuesday and Thursday, or either both of those or either one of those. So anyhow, God bless you guys. Thank you so much for joining. Let me say hi to some people here. Ordinary Girl 74, Ruthie Victoria, Els Rose. Who else was up there? Emmanuel Gillantine. Was Pamela in there? My wife is saying that Pamela was in there. Shell, what's up? Quick Buck Shell. Ese Gordo 1311 joined. And so thank you guys. Ponte Trucha Califas, Tuesday night. She says she's ready. So thank you so much for joining. We'll see you guys then. Oh, there's Joseph. Joseph is there. Have a blessed night. Ruthie Victoria, thank you so much. God bless you guys. Bye. And now.